The most valuable things in life carry a price. Think about that for a moment. Everything of true worth, everything that lasts, requires something of us. It demands our respect, our attention, our care. I want to tell you about a woman I met years ago. She was brilliant, talented, giving to a fault. She poured herself out for everyone who asked. Her time, her energy, her resources, all available upon request. She believed this was love. She thought availability equaled value. Yet she found herself surrounded by people who took and took but never truly valued what she offered. Why? Because we rarely treasure what comes without effort. This is the paradox that many miss. Boundaries are not walls that separate, but foundations that elevate. They are not barriers to connection, but the very structure that makes meaningful connection possible. Today, I want to explore a truth that transforms relationships. Why men, indeed all people, value those who set clear, healthy boundaries. This isn't merely about romantic relationships, though we'll certainly discuss those. This is about a universal principle that shapes every meaningful human connection. The woman I mentioned, her story changed dramatically when she discovered this principle. And by the end of our time together, I believe yours might too. What do you truly value in your life? Think carefully before you answer. Is it the things that came easily, that required nothing of you? Or is it those things you worked for, sacrificed for, perhaps even struggled to attain? There is a fundamental difference between what we momentarily desire and what we deeply value. Desire is often about immediate gratification. It comes quickly and fades just as fast. Value, on the other hand, is about lasting appreciation. It grows stronger with time. Consider this. Studies in behavioral psychology consistently show that we value what we earn more than what is freely given. This is called the IKEA effect. We place higher value on things we helped build. The effort creates the value. This principle extends powerfully into our relationships. When everything is immediately available, without condition, without standard, without boundary, we may enjoy it momentarily, but we rarely value it deeply. I've counseled countless couples where one partner gives unconditionally, expecting this generosity to build love, yet often it accomplishes the opposite. Without healthy boundaries, respect erodes. And without respect, love cannot flourish. The truth is that value is created partly through scarcity and standards. Not artificial scarcity, not games or manipulation, but the natural scarcity that comes from having standards about how you will be treated, how your time will be used, what you will and won't accept in your life. When you communicate through boundaries that your time has value, your emotional well-being has value, your personal space has value, you are not pushing people away, you are teaching them how to truly connect with you in ways that last. This is particularly true for men who often unconsciously seek what psychologists call earned secure attachment. Connection that comes through meeting challenges and standards rather than through unconditional availability. We are living through what I would call an epidemic of boundaryless relationships. The symptoms are everywhere: rising relationship dissatisfaction, increased anxiety, persistent feelings of being undervalued or taken for granted. Technology has erased many natural boundaries that once structured our interactions. We are perpetually available, constantly connected. A message sent expects an immediate reply. Work bleeds into home life. The intimate details of our lives are shared broadly without thought. This boundaryless existence creates a particular kind of confusion, mistaking availability for value. When you are always available, always saying yes, always accommodating, you send an unintended message that your time, your energy, your attention cost nothing. And what costs nothing is often valued accordingly. The statistics bear this out. Relationship researchers find that couples with clear expectations and boundaries report significantly higher satisfaction. One study found that couples who had explicit conversations about boundaries were 62% more likely to describe their relationship as very happy compared to those who left boundaries undefined. Why? Because clarity creates safety. Knowing where the lines are, what is acceptable and what isn't, creates a secure space within which genuine intimacy can grow. I've seen this transformation countless times. When people, particularly women who have been socialized to prioritize others' needs, begin establishing healthy boundaries, their relationships don't diminish, they deepen. The connections that matter grow stronger. The ones that were based merely on convenience or utility fall away, making room for those built on mutual respect. When you set a boundary, you're sending a message far more powerful than the specific limit you're establishing. You're communicating fundamental truths about who you are and what you stand for. First and foremost, boundaries communicate self-respect. They say, I matter enough to protect my well-being. This self-respect is the foundation upon which all healthy relationships must be built. Without it, relationships become unbalanced, breeding resentment on one side and disregard on the other. Boundaries also demonstrate self-acknowledge. They show that you've done the internal work of understanding your own needs, values, and limits. This self-awareness is immensely attractive. It communicates maturity and emotional intelligence. There's a silent message in standards. They speak volumes without words. When you decline to accept disrespectful behavior, when you require consideration rather than afterthought, when you expect reciprocity rather than one-sided giving, you are teaching others about your value without having to explicitly state it. This creates a peculiar security and certainty. In a world filled with ambiguity, clear boundaries provide structure. They eliminate guesswork. They create what psychologists call secure attachment, the ability to connect deeply precisely because the parameters of that connection are understood. There's a powerful connection between personal identity and interpersonal clarity. When you know who you are, what you stand for, what you need, what you will and won't accept, you create the conditions for others to truly know you too. Not a version of you that constantly shifts to accommodate others, but the authentic you with consistent values and needs. This authenticity is magnetic. It draws people, especially men, who are looking for substance rather than shadows. It creates the foundation for a relationship based on mutual respect rather than convenience or habit. I remember counseling a couple where the woman had spent years trying to be easygoing and low maintenance. She never expressed preferences, always deferred to her partner's wishes, never complained when her own needs went unmet. She was shocked when he finally admitted he felt he didn't really know her at all. Her absence of boundaries had created not closeness but distance. When she began the difficult work of establishing boundaries, expressing preferences, declining requests that didn't serve her, requiring respectful communication, something remarkable happened. Rather than driving them apart, it brought them closer. For the first time, he said, he felt he was connecting with the real person, not a pleasant, but ultimately empty reflection of his own needs and wants. Another woman I worked with had a similar experience. She had been raised to believe that saying no was selfish, that putting her needs first was wrong. As a result, she found herself in a series of relationships where she gave everything and received little in return. She was exhausted, resentful, and deeply unhappy. The process of establishing boundaries was terrifying for her. She feared abandonment, conflict, disapproval, But as she gradually learned to communicate her needs, to require respect, to decline excessive demands on her time and energy, her relationship landscape transformed. Not everyone stayed in her life, it's true. Some people, accustomed to her unlimited giving, drifted away when she began requiring reciprocity. But those who remained and those who entered her life after related to her with a respect she had never experienced before. For the first time she told me, I feel seen, not for what I can do for others, but for who I am. Boundaries come in many forms, each protecting different dimensions of our well-being. Understanding these different types helps us establish them more effectively. Emotional boundaries protect your inner world, your feelings, your responses, your emotional energy. They include the right to privacy about your feelings, the right not to absorb others' emotional states, and the right to emotional safety. When someone violates these boundaries, perhaps by telling you what you should feel, dismissing your emotions, or expecting you to manage their feelings, they are overstepping into your emotional territory. Healthy emotional boundaries might sound like, I understand you're upset, but I'm not comfortable being spoken to that way. Or, I need some time to process my feelings before discussing this further. I recall a woman who struggled with a partner who believed he had the right to know her every thought and feeling. If she wasn't immediately forthcoming about her emotional state, he would pressure, question, even accuse her of dishonesty. She came to believe that having any private emotional space was wrong, that true intimacy meant complete transparency at all times. The turning point came when she realized that her emotional life was her own, that she had the right to process feelings privately, to share them in her own time, to maintain an inner world that was hers alone. When she began establishing this boundary, I need some time to process before I talk about this, the initial resistance was intense. But as the boundary held, something unexpected happened. Her partner began to respect not just her boundary, but her. Their conversations, when they did occur, became more meaningful, more authentic, because she was speaking from a place of clarity rather than pressure. Time boundaries recognize that your time is your most precious, non-renewable resource. They protect against the assumption that you are perpetually available. Time boundaries might involve defining working hours, establishing when you are and aren't available for calls or messages, or simply requiring advance notice for commitments, rather than last-minute demands. A client once shared how transformative it was when she stopped responding to non-emergency messages after 9 p.m. It was such a simple change, she said, but it completely shifted the dynamic in my relationship. When I stopped being available 24/7, people, including my partner, started respecting my time in ways they never had before. Physical boundaries honor your space and body. They range from defining personal space to establishing physical intimacy limits. They include basic needs like privacy, rest, and safety. When respected, they create a foundation of trust that allows true intimacy to develop. Financial boundaries establish mutual respect through fiscal clarity. They involve clear agreements about shared expenses, transparency about financial decisions that affect both parties, and respect for individual financial autonomy within agreed parameters. Money issues are among the most common causes of relationship conflict, and clear financial boundaries can prevent many of these tensions. I've worked with many couples where financial boundaries were either non-existent or routinely violated. In one case, a woman repeatedly found herself covering her partner's expenses despite their agreement to split costs equally. Each time she raised the issue, he would apologize, promise to do better, but the pattern would repeat. It wasn't until she established a firm boundary, I won't cover your share of our expenses anymore, and held to it consistently, that the dynamic shifted. Initially, there was resistance, even anger, but over time, he began taking responsibility for his financial obligations in ways he never had before. Intellectual boundaries preserve your right to your own thoughts, opinions, and beliefs. They include the freedom to disagree, to change your mind, and to hold values that may differ from your partner's. Relationships with healthy intellectual boundaries feature robust discussion without demands for agreement. Social boundaries maintain healthy connections within and outside the relationship. They recognize the importance of maintaining individual friendships and family relationships while building a shared social life. They might include agreements about social media sharing, public behavior as a couple. Each of these boundary types contributes to a relationship's overall health. When established with clarity and maintained with consistency, they create a foundation of mutual respect upon which true intimacy can flourish. While boundaries benefit all relationships, there are particular reasons why men often respond strongly to women who establish clear boundaries. The male psychological response to challenge is well documented. From early socialization through adulthood, many men are conditioned to value what they achieve rather than what comes without effort. This isn't universal, but it is common enough to create a pattern. When everything is immediately available without standards or boundaries, it often triggers a subtle devaluation. Boundaries provide structure that many men crave. In the face of constantly shifting social expectations, clear boundaries create certainty. They eliminate guesswork. They provide a framework within which a man can succeed in the relationship rather than constantly fearing he's falling short in ways he doesn't understand. I once counseled a man who described his relief when his partner began establishing clear boundaries. Before, he said, I felt like I was constantly failing, but I didn't know how or why. There were all these unspoken expectations, these invisible lines I was crossing without realizing it. When she started being direct about what she needed, what worked for her and what didn't, it was like someone finally gave me the rule book to a game I'd been playing blindfolded. This addresses one of the most common male fears in relationships, the fear of getting it wrong. When boundaries and expectations are unclear, many men withdraw rather than risk repeated failure. Clear boundaries provide a map that allows confident navigation of the relationship. There's also the simple reality that we respect those who know their own worth. When someone clearly values themselves, not in an arrogant way, but in a healthy, self-respecting way, it naturally evokes respect from others. The person who requires respectful communication, who expects consideration, who declines to accept thoughtless treatment, this person teaches others how to value them. I've seen this dynamic play out repeatedly in my work with couples. Women who feared establishing boundaries, worried they would appear demanding or difficult, discover that the opposite occurs. Rather than driving away their partners, healthy boundaries often increase attraction and deepen commitment. One man explained it this way: when she started saying no to things, started requiring me to plan ahead instead of expecting her to drop everything, started expressing what she needed clearly, I actually felt more secure. For the first time, I knew that her yes meant something because she was capable of saying no. This gets at a fundamental truth. Boundaries create trust. When someone has clear boundaries, their choices become meaningful. Their commitment becomes valuable precisely because it's given by choice, not by default or fear or inability to set limits. Another man shared a similar perspective. Before she established clear boundaries, I never knew if she was doing things because she wanted to or because she felt she had to. When she started being clear about her limits, about what worked for her and what didn't, I finally felt I was with someone who was choosing me, not just accommodating me. This distinction between accommodation and choice is crucial. True connection cannot exist without the freedom to choose, and choice cannot exist without the ability to say no as well as yes. Establishing boundaries is both an art and a science. It requires clarity, courage, and consistency. The art begins with clear, non-accusatory communication. Effective boundaries focus on your needs rather than the other person's failures. Compare "you're so inconsiderate" with "I need more advance notice for plans so I can manage my time effectively." The first attacks, the second informs. Timing matters tremendously. Ideally, boundaries should be established early in relationships, before patterns become entrenched. This doesn't mean listing demands on a first date, but it does mean paying attention to how you allow yourself to be treated from the beginning. If you're establishing boundaries in an existing relationship where they've been absent, recognize this will require patience and persistence. Patterns take time to change. Begin with one or two important boundaries rather than attempting a complete relationship renovation overnight. A woman I worked with had been in a relationship for 7 years before she began the process of establishing boundaries. The pushback was significant. "Who do you think you are?" her partner demanded. "You've never needed this before." Her response was simple but powerful. "I've always needed it. I just never knew I had the right to ask for it." The change wasn't immediate. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, times when it seemed easier to revert to old patterns. But her persistence gradually reshaped the relationship. 3 years later, both she and her partner described their relationship as stronger, more authentic, and more satisfying than it had ever been. Consistency is the key to credibility. Boundaries that shift constantly or are enforced selectively quickly lose their power. When you establish a boundary, be prepared to maintain it consistently, not rigidly, but reliably. It's essential to understand the difference between healthy boundaries and controlling behavior. Boundaries define what you will do, how you will respond, what you will accept, how you will protect your well-being. They don't dictate what others must do. "I won't continue conversations when voices are raised" is a boundary. "You can never raise your voice" is an attempt to control. Perhaps most importantly, establishing boundaries requires courage. There will likely be resistance, especially if you're changing established patterns. Some relationships may not survive the introduction of healthy boundaries. And this, painful as it may be, is valuable information. A relationship that requires the absence of boundaries to function is not a relationship that serves your well-being. I've witnessed women find this courage in the most challenging circumstances. Women leaving abusive relationships. Women in the midst of major health crises. Women facing significant financial pressures. Finding the strength to say, "This is what I need. This is what I will accept. This is how I must be treated." Their stories remind us that establishing boundaries isn't a luxury reserved for those in ideal circumstances. It's a necessity for anyone seeking relationships built on mutual respect rather than fear, habit, or convenience. While establishing boundaries can initially create tension, the long-term benefits for both partners are profound. Boundaries create mutual respect. When both people in a relationship honor each other's boundaries, they demonstrate fundamental respect for each other's autonomy and well-being. This respect forms the foundation for genuine partnership. They provide the security of knowing where you stand. Ambiguity breeds anxiety. Clarity creates confidence. When boundaries are clear, both partners can relax into the relationship rather than constantly scanning for potential problems or misunderstandings. This clarity actually reduces anxiety for both partners. The person setting the boundary no longer has to worry about being taken advantage of or having their needs overlooked. The person respecting the boundary doesn't have to worry about unintentionally causing harm or disappointment through ignorance of unexpressed expectations. The client once described this as the relief of certainty. After years of trying to guess what her partner wanted, needed, expected, and constantly getting it wrong, She experienced profound relief when he began clearly communicating his boundaries. For the first time, she said, I knew what success in our relationship looked like. I knew what mattered to him, what hurt him, what he needed from me. It wasn't always easy to hear, but the clarity was such a gift. Perhaps most surprisingly, boundaries create greater intimacy through defined space. Just as personal space in a home allows family members to come together more harmoniously in shared spaces, personal boundaries in a relationship create the conditions for deeper connection when together. This illustrates the central paradox of boundaries. They create greater freedom within clear limits. When each person knows the parameters of the relationship, they can move freely within those parameters rather than constantly testing edges or walking on eggshells. I've witnessed this transformation countless times. Couples who establish healthy boundaries report not just greater satisfaction, but deeper connection. The relationship becomes not a series of negotiations or disappointments, but a secure space for both people to flourish. One woman described it this way: before I established clear boundaries, I was always holding back parts of myself, afraid of overwhelming him, being too much, asking for too much. Now that we have clear agreements about our needs and limits, I can bring my full self to the relationship. I don't have to be careful or cautious all the time. Within our agreed boundaries, I'm completely free. Her partner echoed this sentiment. Knowing her boundaries actually makes me more confident in how I relate to her. I'm not constantly worried about crossing some invisible line. I know what matters to her, what hurts her, what she needs from me. That knowledge isn't limiting, it's liberating. As we conclude, I want to return to the woman I mentioned at the beginning. After years of boundaryless giving, she began the difficult work of establishing limits. Some relationships didn't survive this change, but those that did transformed into connections of mutual respect and genuine appreciation. The most remarkable change, though, was within herself. As she honored her own boundaries, her self-respect grew. She discovered that her value didn't come from endless availability, but from the authentic self that boundaries protected and revealed. This is the invitation before each of us, to have the courage to value ourselves first, to recognize that our time, our emotional energy, our attention are precious resources to be honored and protected. To understand that in doing so, we don't diminish our connections, we deepen them. Self-respect generates respect from others. This isn't magic, it's psychology. We teach others how to treat us. We establish the standards for our relationships. We create the conditions for either mutual respect or mutual disregard. If you take nothing else from our time together today, take this. You have not only the right, but the responsibility to establish boundaries that protect your well-being. In doing so, you create the possibility for relationships with men, with women, with everyone in your life that are built on mutual respect rather than convenience or habit. Begin today. Identify one boundary you need to establish. Perhaps it's declining to be available 24/7 via text or phone. Perhaps it's requiring respectful communication even during disagreements. Perhaps it's protecting time for your own interests and growth. Whatever it is, communicate it clearly, enforce it consistently, and watch what happens. Not just in how others respond to you, but in how you come to value yourself. Remember, boundaries are not walls that separate, but foundations that elevate. They are the structure upon which lasting, meaningful connections are built. And they begin always with the courage to honor your own worth. The most valuable things in life carry a price. By establishing healthy boundaries, you declare that connection with you is among those valuable things. And in a world of easy access and instant gratification, that declaration is not just powerful, it's transformative. Your boundaries are not selfish. They are sacred. They protect not just you, but the authentic connection that becomes possible when each person in a relationship is fully seen, fully respected. They create the conditions for love that lasts rather than attraction that fades. The journey of establishing boundaries is not easy, but few worthwhile journeys are. It requires courage to risk disapproval, to withstand pressure, to maintain consistency when it would be easier to give in. But this courage creates a foundation for relationships of substance rather than shadow. I invite you today to take the first step on this journey, to recognize your inherent worth, to honor your needs, your time, your emotional well-being, to begin the practice of establishing and maintaining boundaries that reflect your value. The relationships that result may be fewer, but will be far deeper. The connections you form will be based not on convenience or habit, but on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. And most importantly, your relationship with yourself, the foundation for all other relationships, will transform as you honor your own boundaries. This is the path to relationships that fulfill rather than deplete. This is the way to connections that endure rather than fade. This is the journey toward love that grows stronger with time rather than weaker. And it begins with a single courageous step, the decision to value yourself enough to establish and maintain healthy boundaries. Take that step today. The transformation awaits.